Hey, what's up guys? So in this video I want to talk about some of the best radar detectors in around the $200 price point, actually under 200 bucks, so kind of some of the more affordable ones. Generally I like to focus on the higher end ones, in the $300 to $400 price range. In my opinion, the extra money that you would spend for those detectors is well worth it in terms of protection, performance, filtering, features, etc. It's money well spent. But the less expensive ones, of course, are very popular too, perhaps even more popular. I think they actually sell better. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the best radar detectors under the $200 price point. The two detectors that I want to talk about, as well as a third one at the very end, it's going to be the Uniden DFR6, as well as the Cobra DSP9200BT, which has since been discontinued. It originally came out at $400, but you can actually still find it now for less than 200 bucks. Last I looked, it was around 168 on Amazon. The DFR6 you can find for around 175 on Amazon right now, or 179 on BRD. Prices fluctuate all the time, so just check the links in the video description to see current pricing. But you may be wondering why I'm talking about a Cobra and best radar detectors in the same sentence. Like, we're talking about the best ones, right? It's kind of interesting, the story behind this one. Cobras generally suck, especially the old ones, for three primary reasons. Besides the fact that the marketing was complete nonsense with them detecting like 19 bands and a whole bunch of ridiculous stuff, generally the performance was awful, the false filtering was terrible, and they leaked radar in a way that they caused false alerts for everybody running radar detectors nearby, and so they were a problem for everybody else too. So they weren't good for the user running the Cobra, and they were problematic for everyone around as well, and for that reason they're like, don't recommend Cobras. However, Cobra and Escort have merged, and so Cobra is actually taking advantage of some of Escort's technology, and the DSP9200BT is Cobra's first digital detector. And it's actually got really good performance, it's got good filtering, and it doesn't leak anymore, so it addresses all three of those issues. Plus, Cobra is actually moving forward. They're not doing all that like 19 band nonsense, so from a marketing standpoint, they're getting better too. Now, that detector has actually been discontinued. I actually called up Cobra today to kind of figure out, is there a new one coming out or whatever. I don't want to be sitting here talking about a discontinued detector too much. So they've actually discontinued it. Apparently the lady said that it was because it was too small. It is a very tiny detector. So they made one that's a little bit bigger. It's the IRAD, the Cobra IRAD. You can find that, I think it was like 183 bucks on Amazon right now. It retails for just over 200. I don't think it actually has the same technology. When I asked the lady about it for some of the technical details, she wasn't really sure. I asked her, is the performance the same as the DSP? Is the filtering? And she just kind of went silent, and she's like, yeah, it's better. I was like, do you have any testing or, what? She's like, well, customers are saying that they give longer range and all that stuff. So I'm not convinced about that one, the new IRAD, but it is Cobra's newest top-of-the-line radar detector. I don't think it has the same technology. It does advertise IVT, their in-vehicle technology blind spot filtering stuff, and it's got Bluetooth and whatnot, but I haven't tested it. I've never used one. I haven't seen any information about it, but that's something as well that maybe we should talk about, but I'm not going to focus on that. In this one, I want to talk about the DFR6, which has kind of been the standard pick in the 200-ish price point, kind of for the people who wanted an expensive detector, as well as a lot of people are actually happy with the Cobra DSP9200BT. Not the previous gen Cobras. I'm going to talk about some test results here in just a second, and you're going to see the previous ones were awful. Even some of the current ones, like the RAD 450, the RAD 450, awful performance. It's the DSP one specifically that I want to focus on. Now, the reason that we're taking a look at these two detectors in particular is because their performance is actually quite good, able to keep up with detectors in the $300 to $400 price point in many ways, not always, but in many ways, and their blind spot filtering is actually quite effective. So that's really good. They may not have all the features of the more expensive ones, they may not have fully the performance of the more expensive ones, but if you're looking for a more expensive detector and you're trying to hit that sweet spot between, an inexpensive detector but still reasonably good performance, understanding that you're going to be missing features and performance compared to the more expensive ones, those actually do look like they're good options. So I want to go ahead and talk about those two specifically. Now, I've actually done a video specifically talking about the Cobra. It was back when the detector was originally released at the $400 price point. It had a lot of issues that, even though the performance was surprisingly good, in many ways able to meet or exceed the performance of detectors at that price point, there were a lot of issues. However, you can actually work around them. There's things like if you're running ALPs like I am, the laser jammers, the ALPs are constantly transmitting pulses that get reflected back into the Cobra, and so the Cobra is constantly falsing to laser due to the ALPs, which you can't disable in the ALPs, and you can't disable laser detection. fine. You could always put a piece of tape or something. Hidden Cam suggested this on the forum. Put a piece of tape over the laser sensor on the Cobra detector. You've solved that issue. There's things like the fact that when you get an alert on K-band, it's going to report that to the cloud if you have the detector paired with your phone, and then alert everybody else that you just picked up a K-band signal, whether it's legit or false. You are also going to be alerted to everybody else's false alerts. It's kind of the opposite of a lockout. With Escort, when you get a false alert on K-band, you can say, this is a false alert, lock it out, don't alert me again, don't post it to the cloud, it's a false, right? Totally makes sense. Cobra, exact opposite. Oh, you got an alert? Even if it's a false and you mark it as false, yeah, we're going to report that to the cloud so that everybody else has to deal with not only their own false alerts, but your false alerts. And you have to deal with your false alerts and everybody else's false alerts. Completely ridiculous design, but you can turn that feature off. There's other things like the display is a little difficult to see in the sunlight, but if you run your detector up high, a lot of times the top of your car will be blocking the sun, so you're still going to be able to see it. So there's definitely workarounds that you can do. Now, some of the advantages of the Cobra are things like, in some ways the performance is better than the Uniden, not always, but the fact that you can pair the detector with your phone is going to give you low-speed muting, which the DFR6 does not have. You have to step up to the DFR7 to get low-speed muting. That one is $269. So it's going to be a more expensive detector. That detector also gives you GPS lockouts, which the Cobra doesn't have. So the GPS is more functional in the DFR7. The Cobra is kind of more in between. You get the low-speed muting, but you don't get the lockouts. You do get the red light camera alerts, which is cool, but you can get that through Waze. So you get low-speed muting and red light camera alerts, but you don't get the lockouts. So if you want the lockouts, you got to go to the DFR7. If you don't need those, again, we're looking at the more affordable detectors, DFR6 or Cobra, and the Cobra does give you the low-speed muting, which is actually super, super handy driving around town when you're in a parking lot or whatever and there's a grocery store nearby. So that's actually really useful. DFR6 doesn't offer that. So given that, would the Cobra be perhaps a better choice than the Uniden? Because again, it's got good performance, it's got filtering, it doesn't leak, and it's got low-speed muting, and the price is actually almost the same. Now, the Cobra has actually been discontinued. It's not still available. Cobra doesn't sell it anymore, but you can still get it on Amazon. So let's take a look now at the differences in terms of performance by taking a look at some test results, both testing that I've done, as well as testing that the Texas Countermeasure Testing Group has done as well. Now, when I tested the DSP9200BT, it was when it originally came out at $400, and I also had an LRD950 that I was testing, which is the same thing as the DFR7, same performance as the DFR6. Unfortunately, I was running beta firmware at the time. I forgot to bring my laptop, so I wasn't able to switch back to public firmware for the test, so the results are... I'm not too happy with that. You know, when you're testing beta comparing to public, that's always an issue. I also had a Cobra SPX7800BT, which I've reviewed before. It's one of the worst radar detectors I have ever tested. It's the previous generation Cobras. It is awful, like almost to the point of being comically bad. So we're going to use that, even though it was the previous top of the line before the DSPs. That'll show you kind of how the bad Cobras perform in that sense. And then we'll look at the Texas guys. So starting out with 33.8, the results actually did pretty well. This guy was able to, you know, run up right there with like the V1s and the Maxes, which is pretty impressive. It wasn't able to keep up with like the red lines and whatnot, but still, that's very good. It was able to beat the LRD950, and then of course it was definitely able to beat the Cobra SPX7800BT. That guy's going to turn in bottom of the barrel results across the board on every band, every frequency. On 34.7, we saw the same sorts of things where it was in max V1 territory, and surprisingly it actually beat the Uniden. And the reason I say surprisingly is because the Uniden is actually supposed to be quite good on 34.7. We see this time and time again, but it was lacking here, which is actually kind of something I was wondering since I was running beta firmware, and I also only did one test run typically throughout this test, and I may see different results with a different test, and you'll actually see that when we take a look next at 35.5. Actually, something else that I want to point out real quick before we jump to 35.5, take a look. Some of these detectors, I actually did run them twice with the same settings. You'll see right here, I've got the Stinger VIP run 2 different times. I got different results. Here's the red line run 2 different times. I definitely got different results there as well. Here's the LRD950. I actually ran it twice and got the same results both times. And then here's a look at the Max run 2 different times, and I got very different results here as well. So run-to-run variation can definitely be a factor here, so I wouldn't put too much weight into any one of these tests in particular. We definitely want to look at the big picture here. On 35.5, it managed to beat out the red line, the Rodenso Pro SE, only losing to the Stinger. And I was like, what the heck? What is a Cobra doing beating red lines on Ka band? Like, that's crazy. So I was like, okay, I need to rerun this again. Was that just a fluke or what? I reran the Cobra. It performed worse the second time around. It was a little behind the RPSE, but it still managed to beat the red line, which is amazing. And I saw this and I'm like, okay, there is something to this Cobra, you know? It's able to perform. This is good stuff. Testing it out on K-band, it was better than the Max, but it was worse than the V1 and a little worse than the LRD950. So this was only one test, and I generally only ran one run per detector. I definitely should have run more, just limited by time constraints. So as you saw on 35.5, when I reran it, I got slightly different results, right? So I wish I had rerun it, but one test, one set of runs, but it's showing promise so far. Let's go ahead and take a look next at the Texas Countermeasure Testing Group, because they had a chance to test one as well. So they tested the DSP9200BT against the DFR6 specifically, and they also tested it against the RAD450, which is a current, Cobra detector. So current DFR6, current RAD450, and the 9200BT. They tested on 33.8 and then did two different tests on 34.7. Let's go ahead and take a look at the results here. Now, here's a look at the test chart. I know there's a lot of data, but we'll start with the DSP9200BT. It's the one that's in dark blue. As you can see, it actually did pretty well, but the results were kind of variable. Something that they mentioned with this test is there was some traffic. Sometimes traffic was light, sometimes traffic was heavy over the course of the day. There's a lot of testing, and that could definitely impact the results. So that could be one explanation for the variability that you're going to see in the results. But that's also real world, so they weren't able to control testing conditions permanently or completely, but that's something to keep in mind. So anyway, the results actually looked pretty good with the Cobra, but they were also kind of variable as well. If we take a look at the DFR6, it's the one in gray. The results were more consistent, which is really good, but it didn't manage to have like any long range detections the way the Cobra managed to do once. Then if we take a look at the RAD450, it's in lighter blue. That's pretty much bottom of the barrel performance. Next, we're going to go ahead and take a look at 34.7. Again, taking a look at the DSP9200BT in dark blue. The results were, again, variable. It had some better runs and some worse runs. The DFR6 in gray, it did pretty well too, as expected. The RAD450, RAD450, it's in the lighter blue. As you can see here, again, it's got really poor range. Either way, when we're taking a look at this DSP9200BT, it's looking pretty impressive so far, right? Now, what's interesting is they did another 34.7 test, and this time they wanted to make the test course more challenging, kind of set it up as a torture test for radar detectors, and what was really helpful about it was it helped kind of separate different tiers of radar detectors and see in more challenging situations if we can get more separation between detectors, and this is actually really interesting. So in this test course, they ran a whole bunch of different detectors and a whole bunch of runs. The red lines and the magnums consistently did awesome. They gave us about half a mile of detection range, which is not a ton, especially when you're driving at highway speeds, right? Half a mile, but in a tough situation, that is going to provide plenty of warning to slow down in time as needed. So Redline, they kind of set the benchmark for 100% detection on this course is about half a mile or so. Now, the DFR6 also managed some 100% half-mile detection alerts, just like the Redline and the Magnum, which is really cool. It also had some that were down in the 70% range, and the lowest detection, the worst detection, was 58% of the range that the Redlines were offering. It was a little under a third of a mile of warning, so even less, but still, when you're on it, enough time to slow down, right? Now, the issue, this is, if we take a look at the DSP9200BT, it was doing well in some of the easier tests, but in this one, it was not really doing that hot. It was only returning 20% of the detection range compared to the Redline. That translates to about 1/10 of a mile. The people that were testing were reporting that they were nearly able to see the radar car with their eyes before the detector went off. The detector went off just before they were able to see the cars, and that is not sufficient warning to slow down in case you need to. You definitely want advance warning, and in that situation, if there's hills or trees, those kind of things that are blocking the signal, that is not the ideal situation, well, for any detector, but especially the Cobra DSP9200BT. So it looks good in some of the easier tests, but in some of the more challenging ones where you really need good sensitivity, it's not performing as well. So that's kind of something that has me concerned, and I like the the Bluetooth functionality to give it the low-speed muting. I think is fantastic for around town. I like the red light camera alerts built in. I don't like the reporting to the cloud stuff and having to deal with everybody's falses, but you can turn that feature off. I was kind of hoping that this detector would be a good option, and quite frankly, I think it is. I mean, when we're talking about the less expensive detectors, yes, there's always going to be compromises when you're not looking at the detectors that are $300, $400, $500, $600 plus. Like the expensive ones, you're getting that performance typically. I mean, the Uniden R3, it's the one that I run. It's an extra $130 or so over the DFR7, but the extra performance is well worth it in my opinion. Plus all the other benefits as well. So in my opinion, I think running for the higher end detectors, it's a good choice. But when we're taking a look at these lower end ones, I mean, DFR6 seems like it's going to be doing, in some situations, a better job. In other situations, the Cobra could be doing a better job. The Cobra also offers low-speed muting and the red light camera alert, so that's cool. So it brings some additional value to the table, which I think is really helpful. If you drive in a situation where you've got easier terrain, right, more flat situations, straightaways, you don't have hills and a ton of trees like I have around here, you may want to consider the Cobra instead, especially for driving around town. It's got good BSM filtering and good performance in many situations, not the tougher ones, but in a lot of the easier ones. So I think that one is a promising one as well. Now, that detector has been discontinued. When it came out at the $400 price point, there wasn't really much of an advantage. I mean, if you're going to spend that kind of money, get a Max or a V1 or something else that you can get for the same money, and then you're going to get either arrows or lockouts or auto lockouts, or you're going to get a lot more useful features than you can get with the Cobra. So at the $400 price point, no. But now that it's sub 200, well, discontinued, but you can get it for sub 200, that kind of changes things, and I think it may have a place competing head-to-head with the DFR6. Given that it's discontinued, okay, that may not be around for long, whatever. Links in the video description. You can go take a look if you want one, if they're still available, current price, all that. But I'm happy to see that Cobra's doing this. I think it would be cool to see them take this technology, this detector, and if fine, it's too small, make a bigger version or something that gives the performance and sell it around the $200 price point. I think that could actually be a good detector. And the fact that they're moving towards better technology, they're not leaking the way they used to, they've got better performance, better filtering, their marketing is getting better. I'm actually really happy to see this with Cobra. So Cobra today is different than Cobra 5 years ago, 3 years ago, Now, as far as the current models, the RAD series detectors, 250, 350, 450, those ones do not offer the performance the DSP one did, so I wouldn't recommend that. As you saw from the testing that the Texas guys did, not good there. And then the Cobra iRad, the lady on the phone just said, of course, it's got good performance, right? I don't think so. They don't advertise anything about the digital technology and whatnot. I think it's a completely different platform. I don't know. Maybe it is. It could possibly be worth testing further to see if it is or not. So there's always more testing to be done. Typically, I know a lot of people, like myself included, don't want to spend a ton of time at kind of messing around with bottom of the barrel performance, because for an extra $100, you're going to get so much more protection that, again, in my opinion, the features, the filtering, and the performance, well worth the extra money. But, from time to time, I think it's interesting to take a look at the lower end of the spectrum as well, because that's a great option for a lot of people too, for a variety of different reasons. So anyway, I just wanted to do this video talking about the DSP9200BT. Yes, it's got some issues, but you can work around them, like the laser falsing with the ALPs and the lockouts and that kind of stuff. You can work around them, and fine, so be it. In some situations, it may actually be a better option than the DFR6, but I think that in general, the DFR6 is a cleaner, more straightforward recommendation, and I mean, for the sake of simplicity, I think that would be the better one, especially because the DSP9200 is going away, discontinued, blah, 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 right? But I'm happy to see that the Cobras are actually getting better in that regard, so awesome for Cobra. I'm looking forward to see what they do in the future, if they come out with something similar. If not, and the DSP9200BT looks like maybe a better option for you than the DFR6, now you know the pros and cons, and you can have a little more information as far as choosing which one you want. So anyways, again, down in the video description, I'll have links to my previous video with the Cobra. I'm actually working on a review right now for the DFR7 and DFR6, so I'll post that down there. That'll probably be done in a couple days, or today, tomorrow, whatever. I'll get that done. Actually, I'm going to be busy this weekend, but that'll be down there soon. And then links to where you can get both detectors, take a look, see what the current pricing is, availability, all that good stuff. So For my complete guide about my favorite radar detectors and the very best ones, take a look at the Radar Detector Buyer's Guide that I have available on my website, and I'll link to that down in the video description below as well. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys have found this helpful. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys in the next video.